Hello, welcome to Word of Torah and its new home at Nativ. I want to talk to you today about the parsha of Chayei Sarah. This is a very interesting and rich portion of the Torah, and it's one of my favorites because I have a real soft spot for the love story between Isaac and Rivka. Now, this is after the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, and immediately after Abraham has taken Isaac up the mountain to seemingly go through this process of sacrificing him. His mother dies, and there's lots to be discussed about the idea. There is some thought that maybe she heard that her only son and her beloved son was to be sacrificed, and the fear and the mourning of this has brought her life to an end, and this is very tragic and very sad. But that's not what we're going to discuss today. We're going to discuss what happens when Abraham insists that no matter what happens to him, his servant should go to the land that he came from to the people he came from, and sends his servant to find a wife for his son Isaac. And it's very interesting because it seems very clear that the reason Abraham wants someone to come from his family back in Haran is because he doesn't want his son to marry from the peoples of Canaan. It's known that they are idol worshippers and that they aren't people of good character, and that God has been very clear that these people they're not going to eventually be the inheritors of this land, that they're going to go by whatever means. And so he wants to take from his own family. But the thing we know about his family, the thing we know about his father Terach of blessed memory, is that he was an idol worshipper, not only an idol worshipper, but an idol maker. And later, during the course of our introduction to Rivka's brother Lavan, is that he also participates in idol worship. He says himself that he divines later on in the story about the nature of his success in business is that God blessed Jacob and that Lavan increased in his monetary value because God blessed Jacob. But he learns this by divining from idols. So it's not that Rivka's family is very elevated. So why is it that Abraham chooses to go to his family who are idol worshippers as opposed to the people of Canaan who are also idol worshippers? What does he see? Well, he knows about this character Rivka. He knows something about that she's special. Abraham is very close to God. He's very close to the source of all knowledge and truth. So perhaps he knows something about Rivka. We don't know for certain. But we know that when the servant goes out to Haran, he sets himself a test. And he asks God to bless him in his success of finding an appropriate wife. And what does he use? He uses the idea of kindness. He asks that whoever God wants Isaac to marry, she should bring him water and also water his camels. So not just to show kindness to him, but also to show kindness to animals and to show compassion and to put her efforts into showing kindness to the servant. Now we know that the midas of Abraham, the quality of Abraham is one of kindness. So he's looking for a quality in a wife for Abraham's son that we see in Abraham himself. So he wants the kindness of Abraham to continue in the next generation. And the particular part that I want to focus on from this week's parsha, because it's long and it's rich and it's full and there's so much we could talk about, but the bit that sets my heart on fire is the love, the immediate, love at first sight, really, that we see between Rivka and Isaac when they're first introduced. So this shidduch, this arranged marriage, has happened before they've come into contact directly. This servant has gone down looking for a wife, and he said, "This is the right person for Rivka," and he brings them along. And this is the first that they meet, and they don't really know anything about each other, but the word ahava, love, is used. And we don't see that a lot in the early portions. Before this moment here, we don't see specifically that word love. Perhaps not at all. And we'll have to look to see if it comes up anywhere else. But without further ado, let me bring you into the story. The servant has suggested to Rivka's family that Rivka should go with him. And they ask, it has the word v'yikru, Now, the Yikra means he will call, right? But in this case, Vayikru, the U here is plural. So they are asking Le Rivka, to Rebecca, to Rivka. Vayikru Le Rivka, Vyomru, and they said, the U again, they, Aleha, to her. The hey at the end here is a feminine hey, so they're talking to her. They're asking her this question. And the question is, Hatelki, Hatelki. This is a question. Holech, lech lecha. This is to go. So they're saying, will you go im with ha'ish hazeh? Ha'ish is the man, and hazeh is the this. Will you go with this man? V'tomer, and she says, elech, I will go. So this immediately connects with the idea of Lech Lecha, the idea that God asked of Abraham, go for yourself, go to yourself. And they're asking her, will you go? Will you take up this path, this mission? And she says, now notice how when it's V'yomru, and he said is V'yomer, the yod is masculine, here the taf is feminine. So V'tomer means, and she said, Lech. So lech here is like lech lecha or holech, this is to go. But when you put an aleph on the beginning, it means I will, and without a vav, it's not flipped into the past tense. So lech means I will go. So they asked her, they involved her in the process. They didn't decide for her beforehand. Okay. Vai shalchu es Rivka achosam. So shalach is to send, okay? And now we know who's doing it because it's u. This u ending is plural. So vaishelchu is, and they sent. What did they send? Es Rivka. They sent Rivka. Achosam. Now achot is sister, but the mem on the end is theirs. Like the word for they, for them is hem. So achosam is their sister. So they sent their sister. Ve'es Meinikta. The root here is yanach, which is to suckle. But what is a meinikta? Well, this is the nursemaid. So they're sending her and her nursemaid. Now, it's not that she's a baby. She couldn't be answering questions if she's still suckling. What it is this is the woman who's been with her since her birth. This is her wet nurse. That, it's the maidservant who kind of raised her. So they're sending her and they're sending her wet nurse. Ve'es Eved Avraham. And they're sending the servant, the Eved Avraham, the servant of Abraham. So they're sending, so it's Rivka, her wet nurse, and the servant. They're sending them. Ve'es Anashaiv. Now, an Enosh is literally like a mortal, like a person. But the yod here is saying it's plural, and the Vav is implying probably his, so his people. So it's not very clear whether it's the people of the Eved Avraham, his people, or the people of Lavan, the brother, but it's a collection of people. It's a desert train of people. So Rivka and her wet nurse and the servant and some people. So they're all going together. They're being sent. And it goes on to say, Vai Varuchu. Now the root here is Baruch, which is to bless. So they are blessing. It's an u ending, so they're blessing. So this is all with a full heart and joy that they're sending them. Vayverchu es Rivka. They blessed Rivka, v'yamru la, and they said to her, because if it was to him, it would be lamed vav with a dot over it, which is to him. But this is a feminine hey, so la is to her. And as they said to her, achosenu. Okay, so achot is sister, and enu, anu, inu. This is a us ending. So they're saying to her, our sister, right? At you, hayi. Now, hai, not chai. Chai with a chet is life, but hai with a hey is to be, okay? So they were saying to their sister, our sister, at, which is you will be la alfei ravavos. Now, LF is like 1,000, okay? But a yod and a tsere means of. So they were saying you will be like thousands ravavos. So rav is to increase, So you will be, you will become many. You'll become like a nation. This is a beautiful blessing that comes up very much through the story of the Torah, and it has vayirash, and this is to inherit. So you will become many, and you will inherit, right? Zareich. So it's not you will inherit, but your zera, your seed. Zareich, your seed will inherit. So this is the blessing. This is how blessings happen in the Torah, is you say about someone, this wonderful thing will happen to you. And we see this model first by God. God says, you will be fruitful and you multiply. And because God says it, it comes into pass. So here's the idea that we say something wonderful about a person in the hopes that the saying of it causes it to happen. This is why you should never say something terrible about someone. Saying something ill about something is causing a curse. But saying something wonderful about something is saying a blessing and increasing. So what are they saying? That her seed, Zareich, your seed, will inherit. It will inherit Es Sha'ar Sanoiv. Now this is strange. This is strange because Sha'ar is a gate, like the gates of the city. So it's representative of the possessions of the others. But what's Sanaiv? Well, Sanna is like hatred, right? And this is Sanaiv, this is a plural. You have this little yod in here to make it plural. And Vav, it's like his, right? So it's saying you will inherit the gates of your enemies. There's nothing wrong with this phrase. You will inherit the gates of your enemies. It says no one's going. If people come to take from you, you'll end up taking from them. This is a nice thing. Vatakom. Now, to come is to rise, like the classic Boy Scout song Kumbaya. Kumbaya means rise with God, but the taf shows it's feminine. She's doing it. So vatakom, Rivka means she rose. Rivka rose. Okay. V'na'arosaiha. Now, this is a complicated word, but we should start off with the root here. So, na'ar is a youth, okay, so a young person. And na'arot is feminine, right? It's the feminine plural. So, this is the young ladies. And the yod here can also be a pluralizing thing, but it has ha at the end, which is the feminine possessive. So, this is her young women. So, and she rose, did Rivka and her young women, vatir kavna. Now, rachav is to ride, to mount a camel or a horse or whatever. And it says vatir kavna, and they rode al hagamlim. Now, you can probably guess from the sound gomel, this is where we get the English word for the same thing. A gomel is a camel, right? So they rose on their camels. V'teilachna, and they went. Lach, as in lech lecha, as in holech. So they rode on their camels and they went. Acharei, after. So lifnei is before. Acharei is afterwards. But this, and you see the yod and the tseirei is of. So this is after of ha'ish. So they followed the man. They went after the man. Vayikach ha'eved. So this is the eved is the servant, ha'eved. Vayikach, kach is to take. So he took es Rivka, vayelach, and he went. So this is the phrase that Abraham used when dealing with the servant. He said, "Don't take a wife for Yitzhak from the people of this land of Canaan, but go to my family and take from there." So he say, this is the moment when he completes the task set to him by his master Abraham. Vayikach ha'eved es Rivka vayelach, and he took Rivka and he went. Okay, and now here is the moment. This is the moment when because you see a region, Vayitzchak. This is Isaac. This is the son of Abraham. And this gives us a little context. What is Isaac doing all this? But why couldn't he go and find a wife for himself? Certainly, this is what his son Yaakov, Jacob, will do later. He'll go and find his own wife. But what's Yitzhak been doing this whole time? Yitzhak's story is very short. We don't get a lot of detail about his life directly from the Torah. We see with Abraham, he struggles and he moves back and forward and he gets into good times and bad times and wars, and he's getting blessed and cursed, and things are going back and forward. But Yitzhak, we know very little about him. He's seen as being reasonably perfect. He goes along with what his father says. He doesn't argue with him. He doesn't fight with him. So what is Isaac doing when someone is finding him as when he's finding a shidduch for him? What's happening? Well, the Yitzchak ba. So this word bet aleph bo means to come. So Yitzhak came mi vo. Right, so this is mi is from, so from coming, from the coming of be'er lacharei roy. Now this is interesting. Do you remember that a be'er, of course, is a well? Who named this well Lachai Roy? This was named by Hagar, right? This is the well that Hagar was at when she was told by the angel, you should go back and humble yourself under the hand of Sarah, and if you do this, I will make you into a great nation. So this is a well that we associate with Hagar. So it's interesting. It raises all kinds of questions. Why is it here particularly that maybe it's just near the house, they know this place, fine. But he's using the name that Hagar used to name this well. So what was he doing? Vahu, and he, Yoshev, settled, or was, camping, Ba'aretz HaNegev, in the land, Ba'aretz, in the land, HaNegev, of the Negev desert. So he was in the land. He wasn't necessarily staying in one place. He was moving around. He was camping. What was he doing in this place? V'yetze. Now, Yitzias Mitzrayim, Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz. Yitzha'ah is an exit sign above a pub door in Israel. Yitzhak is to go out or to exit. So the Yitzchak, Isaac went out to do what? La suach. And this is suach, is to meditate, to muse, to commune, or to complain. Now, why is this important in the context of Be'er Lachai Roy? Well, this is where Hagar was, and she hid her son under a bush. The same word for bush, strangely, is seach, is the word, same letters. So she hid her son under a thing, and she meditated, mused, communed, and complained with God about the fact of her fate. So this place is the place of bushes and meditation. Strange connections, right? But he went there to suach, to meditate. Basadeh, ba means in or with, sadeh is a field. So he went to meditate in the field. What is it to meditate in the field? Well, in the case of Isaac, he's praying, right? So there's all kinds of information that's coming to us now. And it even says, lifnos arev. So lifnos, panna is the face, right? And ot is feminine plural, and lifnos is to the face, but actually lifne means before. So this is lifnos arev. So why is it not lifne erev? Because if it was lifne erev, it would be one time. But lifnos erev means this is a regular thing. He goes out in the fields before the evenings to meditate and to pray to God. Different times, the patriarchs are said to pray at different times. So we get these 3 different prayer times from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so he's gone out into the fields in the desert to pray before evening. Vayisa, and so nasa is to lift. Okay, vayisa is he lifted. Einav, ayin is an eye, right? And the yod here is kind of saying plural, and the vav is male possessive, his. So he lifted his eyes, v'yar, and he saw. Ro'eh is to see. Reish Aleph Hey is to see. So v'yar, and he saw. V'hine. This is the same word as hineni. This very important word that we get at real key pivotal moments of the Torah. We hear this phrase, hineni, right? So what does he say? V'hine, and behold, gamalim, camels, bo'im, are coming. So bo, bet aleph is to come. Boim is the plural. So because why is it plural coming? It's because it's plural camels. So he sees, so he goes and lifts his eyes and he sees a train of camels. So we're seeing the story now from Isaac's perspective, from Yitzhak. Then what do we see? Vatisa Rivka es eneha. Exactly the same phrase. He, v'yisa enov, he lifts his eyes, v'yar, he lifts his eyes and he sees, and then immediately after, v'tisa Rivka es eneha, and she lifts her eyes. So we're seeing, it's like a rom-com, or a dramatic love story, where he lifts his eyes and she lifts her eyes. They're being put on a very even scale. She's come from this family of idol worshippers, and she's shown kindness. Isaac has come from this family of huge tzaddiks and holy people, and we're seeing them being really put on an equal footing, in that they're being brought together. They both agreed. She said, yeah, I'll go with them. She's not been kidnapped. She's agreed to this process. And now they're being brought together, and the first time they each lift their own eyes and see the other one. V'teira. You can also see the grammar here. So v'yisau is with a yod. He lifts his eyes. V'ya, and he sees. And in her case, v'tisa, v'teira. So it's the same words, but the masculine and the feminine. So v'tisa Rivka es eineha, she lifts her eyes. V'teira, and sees es Yitzchak, she sees Yitzchak. And what does she do? V'tipol me'al hagamol. So nafal is to fall. It's to descend, right? But what does it mean? She lifts her eyes and she sees him, and what, she falls? No, she falls. V'tipol me'al. Me is min, which means from. Al is on top of. Hagamol. She fell off her camel. I don't think she lost her footing. She was so shocked by how beautiful this man is that she literally fell off her camel. She just got down from her camel, but it feels dramatic. It feels like, and she fell off her camel. She was so shocked by this guy. Well, it's not all about looks for them. These are very elevated people. These are people connected to the Borei Olam, to the Creator of the world. They are prophets. They get to speak to God, and God speaks to them. By the way, of course, Yitzhak. He's one of the Avot. He's absolutely a prophet. He's not just a prophet. He's one of the Avot. He's the beginning. Is Rivka on this level as well? Well, we'll see further in her story that when she has trouble in pregnancy, she speaks to God and God answers her. She is a prophet, a prophetess, if you want to make it feminine. But, absolutely, these two people are of incredible importance. It's not just incidental. She's not just some schmo from the fields. She's an elevated, holy character. So she falls down from her camel. She knows something. V'tomer, and she said, El ha'eved, to the servant, Mi ha'ish halazeh. Now, zeh, of course, is this. Ha'ish is the man. And the word mi, this is a question. Who is the man this? Right? So she doesn't know immediately who he is. She knows why she's going to this place, right? She knows she's being brought to her new husband, but she doesn't know what he looks like. She's never met him before. And she sees him and she falls off her camel and says, who's that guy? Who is that guy? Now, chas v'sholem, it would be someone other than her husband. She's going to meet her husband. She just sees some hunky guy in the fields and says, who's that guy? Immediately it would be a problem for her reputation if she's just looking at guys. No, she knows. So she says, who is that guy? So V'tomer el ha'eved, she says to the Eved, Mi ha'ish halazeh, who is the man, this, ha'holech, see that word again? Lech lecha, holech, that goes basadeh, in the field. Ba means in or with, sadeh is the field. It goes on to say, likra seinu. Well, kara is to call, right? And inu, this means us. So is to call to us? Well, let's look at it in the context. It just means towards us in this particular context. It's right that the root is to call, but in this case, the particular manifestation is towards us. So, mi ha'ish halazeh haholech b'sadeh lechrasenu. Who is this man there that goes in the field to meet us? V'yomer ha'eved. And the Eved, the servant, says, Hu Adoni. Now, don't get confused. Often when we talk about God, we say Adonai, which means my Lord. That's because we're not pronouncing the proper correct name of God. This is not the name of God. This is the phrase Adon, which means Lord, and Adoni is my Lord. So it's like he's my master. That's what it is. So when we call God Adonai, we're saying my master. God's my master. There's no one else, right? But this is a servant. He works for the guy. This is his master. So he's literally saying, he's not saying this is God. He's saying this is my master. Okay. So V'yomer ha'eved, hu Adoni. He is my master. V'tikach. Remember we had yikach when the servant did it earlier. Yikach is to take. V'tikach, this is the feminine taf. So she took hatzaif. Hatzaif. What is it? What is a tzaif? A tzaif is a wrapper, a shawl, or a veil. So she took her veil, v'tiskas. Right? So kasa is to cover, conceal, or hide. So this is interesting. Because in a modern Jewish wedding, the woman comes down the aisle and the man goes out to greet her, right? You can see the pattern. And he takes her veil and he covers her face. Why? Because she's so beautiful, this bride that he's looking at. If he was to marry her looking at her face, people might misunderstand and think he's only marrying me because I'm beautiful. Right? You're so beautiful, I can't even look at you when I marry you because I need everyone to know that I'm not marrying you for your looks. Right? Where do we get this idea? From this verse. It's interesting that in other cultures, they'll come down with the veil on and they'll take the veil off when they marry, which is called, it's a little bit like they've misunderstood the purpose of this. I'm not saying, oh, bring the wife and I can't see her. Now, yeah, so I want to marry. No. She does the opposite. She says, no, I'll cover my face and see if he marries me. Okay. V'tikach hatzaif, v'tiskas, and she took her veil and she covered herself. She concealed her face. So this is the hispa'el, hatiskavta. We don't have to look about that too much. But what we have here, vaysaper ha'eved leYitzchak. Okay. So Sefer is a Torah scroll, a scroll, right? So sapara can mean to count, right? Or it can mean to tell, like the idea that you would read a book or you would read a count, right? But in this case, vaytzaper ha'eved leYitzchak es kol hadavarim asher asa. So what he's doing is, he's not counting, he's recounting, as in a recount, a story, okay? Vaysaper, and he recounted, ha'eved, the servant did, leYitzchak, to Isaac, es kol, all, hadavarim, the things, asher, that, asa, and asa is he did, okay? So he catches Isaac up on the whole story. This is where I went to speak to this guy, Lavan. I told the story like this. I knew this was the woman for you. I checked with them. They're happy. They sent us on our way. This is your wife. Vayisaper ha'eved laYitzchak, to Isaac, es kol hadavarim, all these things, asher, that asa he did. Vayviecha Yitzchak. Now, we have generally in Torah Hebrew, we have the verb first and then the subject who's doing the verb. So you see how, although the vowels have changed, the root here is bo, beit aleph, which is to come. And because we have the yod here, it's he will come, and the vav is a tense flipper, so it means past tense, so he came. Ha. This is the feminine hey, this is the her. Vayviecha is he came to her. Yitzchak. Yitzchak came. Ha o heleha. So what it is really, there's another element which is missing, which is the intensity of the verb. And because this is vie rather than boa, this is not to come, but it's the causative. It's the hifal. And the hifal is the causative. So rather than coming to her, it's he brought her. This hey is still her, but he brought her, Yitzhak did, ha'ohela, to her tent, right? So ohel is a tent, ha'ohel is the tent, ha'oleha is her tent. Whose tent? Sarah. Imo. Av is father, im is mother, imo, with a vav with a dot over it, this is his mother. So he brought her to the tent of his mother. Now, this is interesting. There's a lot of connotations here. You'd think, he's bringing her to meet the mother, but oh no, because we know that Sarah died at the beginning of this story. So he's bringing her to his mother's tent. What's happening? We'll remember the first wedding between Adam Harishon and Chava Imanu, Chava Ein Kol Chai, right? So the first marriage between Adam and Eve, we were told at that point that that they left the Garden of Eden because they made their choice. And the Torah tells us this is why it's good for a man to leave his mother and his father and go and join with his wife. Well, this is what happened, is Adam Harishon left the Garden of God, which was effectively his parent, right? And he joined with his wife, right? So what's happening? He's lost his mother, Sarah, Imo. He's mourning the loss of his mother. He's meditating in the fields, praying to God in the evenings. Then he's brought his wife and he takes her to his mother's tent. So he's saying, you're now the woman of my life. Before you came along, my mother, that was the woman of my life. Now you're inheriting her tent, her place in the family. Now, we've gone from being Avram Avinu and Sarah and Manu. They were the parents in my family. Now you and I are going to be the parents. You're going to take my mother's tent. We're going to be the matriarch and patriarch of this clan. We're taking over this role. I'm taking, and this is now your tent, which is kind of actually quite beautiful. And he goes on to say, Vayikach, and he took es Rivka, so he took her for a wife. So he took her to the tent, and that's where they became man and wife. Vat he lo. Now, the root here is he, hey yod, which is to be. And the taf saying is she was, the vav makes it past tense, and she was lo. So lamed means 2 or 4, and the vav with the dot over it means him. So she was for him, or she was to him, laisha, for a wife. So he took her to his mother's tent, and she was for him like a wife. And this is the word, vayehaveha. Now, ahava, that's love. And you shouldn't take that for granted, because it's not been mentioned before. So it's not just that, okay, we're now forming this bond, we're now we've decided we're going to make a dynasty, we're going to have children, yada, 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 we're going to inherit, we're going to make a nation. No. It says that first. First, she became for him as a wife, and then he loved her. Real love, ahava. And then a third thing. So the first thing is they became a couple. The second thing is they formed love. The third thing is Vayinachem. Now, this is like the prophet Nahum or the prophet Noach. This is the same root as the prophet Noach, and it means to comfort. Vayinachem Yitzchak Acharei, Lifnei, Acharei. Lifnei is before, Acharei is afterwards, Imo. So what the idea was, is Yitzchak comforted himself after his mother, as in after the loss of his mother. So first, a proper relationship was was brought into the fore by people who knew Isaac and loved him and knew what was right for him. They said, we're not going to choose you, some crazy idol worshiper from the. We know that there's a woman who's right for you. We know that she's of a particular midas, of a particular quality. We're going to bring her. We're going to give her the choice about whether or not this happens. Then we're going to bring her to this journey that you and your family are going, the Lech Lecha journey, the Great Commission to be a light to the nations and be a blessing to all nations. And I'm going to bring her to you. You saw each other. Instantly there was a connection, there was chemistry, there was a spark. She falls off a camel. They speak. They go to the tent. They become married. They become in love. And he becomes comforted from the loss of his mother. It's very beautiful. And that's why I couldn't leave these verses alone, but I had to kind of bring you to this particular part of the story. Now, I think that you should look in the Torah and see if you can find the word love, ahava, aleph, hey, vet, hey, ahava, in the Torah, and see when is the first time this shows up. When is the first time it shows up, and when is the second? Because there's something really interesting to investigate about when love becomes part of the equation. And there's something else I want to mention to you. The word please in Torah Hebrew is no. Who's the first person to say please? It's Avram Avinu. And after Abraham says this, God says it to Abraham. So this is the introduction of respect, right? But who does Abraham say it to first? He says it to his wife. The first time the word please is said, it's from Avram Avinu to Sarah Imanu. That's that generation. Respect, kindness. This generation, we get love. That's very significant. You see if it shows up in the story of Yaakov. Does Yaakov love someone? So we're seeing the emergence of everything you need. But notice that respect comes before love. You can't love someone you don't respect. So you've got to treat someone with respect. That's the priority. Thank you very much for your time.